Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the why, what and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles mentioned in the description box below from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 31st December 2018. So let's start our discussion. This article on page number 8 is related to the issue of farm distress or the rural distress. Further, this article has been written in the light of the farm loan waivers that have been done in the three states of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. So in this regard, this article highlights that the rural distress cannot only be solved by farm loan waivers, and much more needs to be done to reduce the farm distress or the farm debt in the rural areas. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 of the mains examination. Now if you go through the previous DNS of 9th December 2018, you will find a discussion related to the rural farm distress. So first you can go through this video to understand the rural distress problem in India, and after that you should go through this article and the points that we will cover in this video. Further, you can compile the issue of farm distress and the farm loan waivers from both these articles. So in this line, this article highlights that the farm loan waiver is just one immediate step to address the rural distress. And finally, it highlights that there is need to holistically address the problem by bringing in structural change in the rural credit system. So now let us look at the points which are highlighted by the article regarding the intensity of rural distress in India. Further, we will understand what is required to ensure that the benefits of such farm loan waivers reach small and marginal cultivators. And finally, we will look at a bill which has been proposed by All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee, and what are the key aspects of that bill and how that can help in preventing the rural distress. So first, let us look at some of the points which have been highlighted by this article, and at the end of this discussion, you will get a question for practice from your mains examination point of view. So first, let us look at the intensity of rural distress that has been highlighted. So in this regard, you should note that the National Sample Survey Organization or the NSSO has highlighted that about 52% of the farming households are indebted. And in some states, the percentage of farming households which are indebted is about 89 to 92%. For example, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, about 90% of the farming households are under debt. In this regard, it has also been highlighted that the debt has increased enormously from informal sources. And these informal sources are not a part of the institutional credit system. For example, banks and cooperative societies. And these informal sources are generally money lenders. And these money lenders charge exorbitant rate of interest, due to which the farmer is never able to come out of the debt trap. Further, you should note that the burden of farmers runs to tens of thousands of crores every season. And this is because of three reasons. First is the lack of compensation during drought and disasters. The second is the failure of crop insurance scheme. And the third is the deficit due to prices falling below the announced minimum support prices. So here you should note that the minimum support price is announced for various crops. Now this MSP or the minimum support price is generally considered as a benchmark price for that product. However, at times the market rate for such crops is generally below the minimum support price. Now here you should note that the government procures only a part of the total production by the farmers, and most of the farm produce has to be sold in the market. Now as generally the market price is below the minimum support price, the farmers do not get a remunerative price for their farm product. And this is one of the important reasons which is leading to debt for farmers in every season. Now further, you should note that the issue with farm loan waivers is that it generally benefits the large landholders. And the benefits of farm loan waiver do not reach small and marginal farmers. Further, these farm loan waivers are immediate steps for relief. And generally the same situation arises after every 2 or 3 years. So now the two questions that need to be addressed is that how can one ensure that the benefits of farm loan waivers reach small and marginal cultivators? And secondly, how does one guarantee that the same situation is not repeated after every 5 years? So in this regard, the article highlights that a bill has been developed by the All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee. So now the first key element of reform which has been proposed by this bill is related to a functional institutional credit system. And this functional institutional credit system will be accessible and accountable to all cultivators. So in short, it will try to address the first question that we have raised here. That is, the benefits of such farm loan waiver should reach all farmers, including the small and marginal cultivators. And secondly, the bill targets the protection from debt trap in bad years, which means that it will not lead to the repetition of same problem after every year. So now first let us look at why is there a need for functional institutional credit system. Now mainly this is because the small and marginal farmers are not able to get their loans from the institutional credit system. And this institutional credit system generally includes the banks and the cooperative societies which provide loan to the farmers. However, you should note that the small and marginal farmers are mainly dependent on money lenders for their credit. And that is why the loan waivers do not help the small and marginal farmers. So in this regard, it has been highlighted by a study was conducted by the Raithu Swaraj Vedika. And it showed that 75% of the farmer suicides in Telangana were by tenant farmers, or simply those farmers who are generally small and marginal and are working on the lands of other big landholders. Further, you should note that a survey by NSSO has highlighted that the average debt from the institutional sources for the small and marginal farmers was only rupees 17,570 per household, and it was about 1,41,804 for medium and large farmers. This means that the institutional credit is much more targeted towards medium and large farmers, and the small and marginal farmers generally do not have access to the institutional sources of credit. Further, you should note that the Reserve Bank of India had come out with guidelines in 2004. And these guidelines by RBI aimed at extending loans to the landless farmers. And further, these guidelines also highlighted a need for debt swapping scheme which would convert the informal loans of farmers into bank loans. However, these have not been implemented properly. So these are the three issues which need urgent attention. So that is why this bill highlights a need for functional institutional credit system which will be accessible to even small and marginal farmers. So now let us look at the bill which has been proposed by the All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee. So this bill is named as Bill for Freedom from Indebtedness. And this bill guarantees all the farmers access to institutional credit. And it will cover all the land owning farmers and will also cover other types of farmers like the sharecroppers, the tenants, the Adivasis, women farmers and the animal rearers. So in this line, you should note that this bill aims at covering all the people which are associated with the farming, and they will include the large land-owning farmers as well as other small and marginal farmers like the sharecroppers, tenants, Adivasis and women farmers also. It will require the registration of all the cultivators and provide them Kisan credit cards. So in this regard, you should note that this is critical because the marginal and landless farmers are mostly excluded from the institutional credit. And that is why they are at the mercy of money lenders and input dealers. Now the second aspect of this bill is related to the protection of farmers from debt trap in bad years. Now the second step that has been suggested by this bill is related to the protection of farmers from debt trap in bad years. Now here you should note that the farm loan waivers are generally provided in the election years. And these waivers are not targeted and they do not provide relief during the bad years or years in which the farmers suffer from natural disasters or pest attacks, etc. So in this regard, this bill proposes that a Farmers Distress and Disaster Relief Commission should be set up at national and state levels. And it will be based on the model of Kerala's Farmers Debt Relief Commission. Now what will this Farmers Distress and Disaster Relief Commission do? Now if this commission notices that there are incidences of natural disasters and extensive pest attacks, the Commission can recommend the declaration of certain areas or crops as distress affected in a particular year. Further, this Commission will have power to order measures of debt relief. And these will include loan rescheduling, interest waiver, one-time settlement, discharge of debt installments, and in extreme situations, immediate discharge of debt. So this will be a more targeted approach and the farmers will not have to wait till the election years. This is because the farm loan waivers have now become political in nature. Further, this bill proposes that the state level commission is also empowered to pass orders regarding non-institutional loans of distress affected farmers. And you should note that these non-institutional loans are generally provided by money lenders and input dealers like the seed and the fertilizer merchants. So the establishment of these commissions will help in targeting the debt trap in bad years. And the farmers will not have to wait till the election years when generally these farm loan waivers are carried out. Now some more suggestions have been provided by the author in this article. So in this regard, it has been highlighted that the concepts of limited liability and bankruptcy protection should be introduced in the farming sector as well. as we know that various bankruptcy provisions are available to the corporate sector loans. So the author has highlighted that these bankruptcy protections should also be provided to the farming sector. And finally, it has been highlighted that the agriculture should be made a profitable business. And this can be done by ensuring fair and remunerative prices by increasing the coverage of MSPs, lowering the cost of cultivation. So this targets basically the input of the farming system, and the prices for these inputs should be lowered. And finally, the promotion of viable farmer collectives and sustainable models of agriculture. For example, the introduction and use of drought-resistant varieties in areas which are vulnerable to droughts. Now, after going through this discussion, you should try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. And you can use all the points that are mentioned in this article. With this, let us move on to the next article. This article on page number 14 analyzes the advantages and disadvantages of different business models of credit rating agencies. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 of the mains examination under the topic Economic Development. Now here you should note that these credit rating agencies in our country have come under criticism. And this is because of their failure to predict the credit defaults of non-banking financial companies like the IL and FS. Now in the IL and FS crisis, you should note that its credit rating was decreased from AAA to D rating in just 45 days. Now as this change in rating from the super grade AAA to the junk rating D was done in just 45 days, these credit rating agencies failed to predict the credit default by IL and FS. So due to this, it is important for us to understand the various type of rating agency models that are available in the market. And plus we will look at various advantages and disadvantages of these rating agency models. But before that, first let us understand what is meant by a credit rating agency. Now you should understand that the credit rating agencies are the entities which assess the ability and willingness of the issuer company for timely payment of interest and principal on the debt instruments. And through this assessment, these companies provide ratings to various instruments and securities which are issued by a company. And these ratings are generally given as alphanumeric symbols like AA+, A-, etc. Now regarding the securities, you should understand that these are the bonds, stocks or equities that are issued by a company. So simply these ratings are based on comprehensive evaluation of strengths and weaknesses of the company's fundamentals. And these fundamentals will include financial as well as the macroeconomic, regulatory and the political environment in which this company is working. So simply the credit rating agencies are those entities which provide rating to the securities and instruments which are issued by the company. And these ratings provide an assessment of the company's ability to pay the interest back to its debtors. Now after understanding this, let us understand what are the different credit rating business models available in the market. Now there are mainly three models of credit rating agencies. And these models of credit rating agencies are based on who pays for getting these ratings. For example, if an issuer company pays for the rating, it is known as issuer pay model. However, if an investor pays for the ratings, this is known as investor pay model. So now first let us understand the basics of these three models of credit rating agencies. Now under the issuer pay model, the issuer or the company pays the money to the credit rating agencies. And by this, these companies get a rating for their instruments. Further, these companies provide all the necessary details, for example, the company's balance sheet and business details. And based on a thorough analysis of such details, the credit rating agency issues a rating to the instrument which are issued by this company. Now, as the payment for getting the rating is done by the issuer company itself, it is known as issuer pay model. The second type of model is the investor pay model. And under this model, the investor is required to pay money to the credit rating agency in order to get the credit rating of an instrument which is issued by the company. Now, an important point to be noted here is that only those investors who are ready to pay for the rating can access this rating. And as such, these ratings are not publicly available, and these are available only to those investors who pay for these ratings. And finally, the third type of model is the regulator pay model. And in this model, the regulator of the country pays to get the credit ratings. Now, as these credit ratings are paid for by the regulator of the country, these ratings are available to all the investors. However, as we know that in the investor model, these ratings are available only to those investors who pay for getting the ratings from the credit rating agency. Now let us look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of these models in a tabular manner. Now first of all, let us look at the advantages of the issuer pay model. Now in this you should note that the ratings are available to entire market free of charge. And this is because the payment for these ratings have already been done by the issuer of the instrument or the company itself. Now as these ratings are freely available in the market, these are also available to small investors. And you should note that the small investors are the most vulnerable section of investors when a default of NBFCs like IL&FS occurs. Now secondly, as the ratings are paid for by the issuer or the company itself, it provides the rating agency with high quality information. And due to this, the rating agencies produce a quality analysis and the ratings are generally of good quality. However, there are certain disadvantages associated with this issuer pay model. The first one is that it can lead to serious conflict of interest. Now you should note that the basic purpose of these ratings which are provided by the credit rating agencies are that they help the investors in analyzing the situation of the company. However, when the payment for these ratings is done by the company or the issuer itself, the credit rating agencies may try to inflate the rating and will try to satisfy the issuer company. This is because this issuer company is paying for these ratings. So that is why it will lead to a conflict of interest. The second disadvantage is that this may lead to rating shopping. Now by rating shoppings, you should understand that the issuer company approaches various rating agencies for the credit rating. And in this, the issuer company tries to produce only those ratings which are most favorable for them. And they try to conceal or hide the lower ratings which are provided by other agencies. So this means that the issuer company will deliberately try to improve its credit rating. Now after going through this, let us try to understand the advantages and disadvantages of investor pays model. Now the first advantage is that it will avoid the conflict of interest of the credit rating agency. Because in this case, the credit rating agency is not being paid by the issuer itself. The second advantage of the investor pay model is that this would enable the investors to get credit ratings based on true and actual financial condition of the company. And these ratings will help the investor in improving its quality of investments. However, there are certain disadvantages associated with this model also. And the first is that these ratings are not available publicly. This is because these are only available to those investors which pay for the ratings. So as such, these are not available to small investors generally. And we know that these small investors are the most vulnerable ones. Secondly, the quality of rating is compromised. Now this quality of rating is compromised because the issuer company does not provide much information related to its business affairs. And due to the lack of availability of quality information with the credit rating agency, the quality of ratings is generally compromised. And the third disadvantage is that it poses serious conflict of interest involving the investors themselves. Now here you should note that as the investor is paying to the credit rating agency, he will try to influence the credit rating agency to give a lower than what is the actual rating of that instrument. This is because by this, the investor can negotiate the interest rate on various instruments. So that is how the conflict of interest arises. Now finally, let us look at the regulator pay model. So here you should note that the regulator is the Securities and Exchange Board of India or the SEBI. So this information is important for us from preliminary examination point of view. Now the advantages that are associated with the regulator pay model is that it eliminates the conflict of interest. As we know that the regulator is a neutral body and does not have any interest in the instruments which are issued by the issuer company. And also the regulator does not invest in any of the securities or the instruments which are issued. That is why it is a neutral player and it eliminates the conflict of interest. However, there are certain problems associated with the regulator pay model as well. The first problem is related to the choice of the credit rating agency and what amount should be paid to this credit rating agency. Now, as we know that there are multiple credit rating agencies available in the market. So it becomes difficult for the regulator to decide as to which company should be chosen for these ratings. Now, the second disadvantage with the regulator pay model is that if a regulator chooses a particular credit rating agency, it may not be able to provide the best credit rating. This is because they might not be equipped with the quality information with them to analyze the situation of a issuer company. And finally, it will reduce the profitability of credit rating agencies. This is because the regulator generally pays less amount as compared to the issuer or the investors. So these are certain advantages and disadvantages of these three models of credit rating agencies. Now, after understanding the advantages and disadvantages of these credit rating agency business models, let us understand that these have two important objectives. The first should be that they should ensure ratings of high quality. And further, they should ensure that all the market participants have access to such ratings. For example, as we have learned that in the investor pay model, these ratings are available only to the investors. So here the basic objective of any model should be that it should provide all market participants with the access to such ratings. And further, there should be minimum conflict of interest so that the ratings are fair and of high quality. Now, as you have understood that all the models have their pros and cons. So in order to pick the best model, we should consider two primary objectives of the credit ratings. The first is that they should be of high quality, and the second is that they should be of open access and should be available to everyone. So in this context, the article highlights that the issuer pays model appears to be the best. This is because in the issuer pay model, the company or the issuer company provides high quality information related to its business affairs to the credit rating agency. And in such a case, the quality of credit rating will be of high level. However, at the same time, the issue of conflict of interest should be addressed. So after going through these points, you should try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. Now let us also look at a question from your preliminary examination point of view. Now you should try and answer this question from your preliminary examination point of view, and the answer for this question will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the correct answer here is C, that is, these credit rating agencies are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Board of India. And with this, let us move on to the next article. Now this data on page number 14 is related to the gross capital formation in India. So this shows the trend of the gross capital formation. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic economic development. And it is also important for us from preliminary examination point of view. So in this article, let us try to understand the basics of gross capital formation from your preliminary examination point of view. Now, if you look at this graph, you will find that the gross fixed capital formation has registered a sharp increase in the present year. And you should note that the gross capital formation had registered a sharp decline in the year 2014 and 15 as is visible from this graph. So this trend is important for us from preliminary examination point of view. So now regarding the gross capital formation, you should understand that it represents the net investment in an economy. That is why it is an important indicator. And this gross capital formation is calculated as percentage of investment made each year out of the total GDP. And it is calculated by the formula as can be seen here. That is, it is the investment divided by the GDP of that year in percentage terms. Now let us understand what are the key components of gross capital formation. Now there are three main components of the gross capital formation. The first is the fixed capital formation, second is the changes in the inventories, and the third includes the valuables. Now the first component, that is the fixed capital formation, includes investment in fixed assets. And these fixed assets or fixed goods are used in the process of producing other goods and services. So these fixed assets are basically related to the infrastructure in an economy. And these can include roads, railways, machineries, equipments and buildings. So these are the fixed assets. So the fixed capital formation represents the gross fixed capital formation or the GFCF. And here you should note that a high fixed capital formation is critical for the growth of economy. This is because it promotes production of other goods and services. The second aspect of capital formation is related to the changes in the inventories. And this includes the value of raw materials of semi-finished and finished goods which are put into the stocks or the inventories. So this aspect includes those finished or semi-finished goods which are a part of the stocks and are yet to be sold. And the third aspect of the capital formation is the valuables. And these valuables have expectations of high capital gains. And these will include precious metals like gold, diamond, etc. And these can also include works of art and expensive jewelry. So these are the three aspects of gross capital formation. Now after going through this discussion, you should try and answer this question from your preliminary examination point of view. The answer for this question will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the correct answer here is A, that is only the road infrastructure will be included in the calculation of gross fixed capital formation. As we know that the other two are components of gross capital formation but are not part of gross fixed capital formation. And with this, let us move on to the next article. This article on page number 8 highlights that how important judgments delivered by the Supreme Court have helped in filling a legislative void on various conflicting social issues. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 2 of the mains examination. So the article highlights that the important verdicts of Supreme Court like the Aadhaar judgment, the decriminalization of homosexuality and the Sabarimala judgment highlight that the Supreme Court has helped in filling the legislative void. Further, it has also helped in realigning the public policy with the changing social context. So by these verdicts, the Supreme Court has highlighted the transformative or the adaptable nature of Indian Constitution. So simply it has highlighted the transformative constitutionalism. So now here we should understand the difference between a constitution and constitutionalism. And further we will look at the important highlights of the Supreme Court judgment in the Navtej Singh Johar case. Now in this line, the article has highlighted that the modern political thought draws distinction between constitutional and constitutionalism. In this line, it has been highlighted that a country can have a constitution, however, it might not necessarily have constitutionalism. For example, a country with a dictatorship can be said to have a constitution, however, it does not have constitutionalism. So in this regard, you should note that the constitutionalism insists on limitations that are placed upon the governmental powers. And as we know that in the Indian Constitution, the limitation on the governmental powers are provided by the fundamental rights. Further, constitutionalism envisages checks and balances in the government. And due to these checks and balances, the powers of legislature and the executive are restrained. Now these checks and balances are important because unlimited power in the hands of legislature and the executive will lead to the restrictions on the freedom of the citizens. So in essence, you should understand that constitutionalism points towards the limited government or limitation on the governmental powers. So in this regard, the article has highlighted that the judiciary through its judicial review has put checks and balances on both the legislative and the executive action of the state. And this particular aspect of the judiciary through its judicial review has been highlighted in the important verdicts of Aadhaar case, the decriminalization of homosexuality and the entry of women into Sabarimala temple. So now let us look at the Supreme Court verdict in the Navtej Singh Johar case which decriminalized homosexuality. And what were the points that were highlighted in this verdict? So in the Navtej Singh Johar case, the Supreme Court has analyzed the constitutional validity of section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. And you should note that the section 377 of the Indian Penal Code had criminalized homosexuality. So while analyzing the validity of the section 377, the Supreme Court observed that its constitutional validity should be tested in terms of idea of privacy, which is highlighted under the fundamental rights of life and personal liberty. So in this regard, the court has observed that the right to life and personal liberty are expressive of self-determination. And simply, the right to life and personal liberty provide for self-determination to an individual. And in this line, this self-determination includes sexual orientation and declaration of sexual identity. Further, you should note that in the Puttaswamy case, which was related to the right to privacy, the 9-judge bench had observed that the sexual orientation is also a part of person's privacy. And it had also observed that the right to privacy is a fundamental right under the Indian Constitution. And it is in this case, it was observed that the right to privacy is implicit in the right to life and liberty, which has been guaranteed by the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So in the light of the right to privacy judgment, the Supreme Court analyzed that the section 377 of the Indian Penal Code is violative of the fundamental right to privacy. Further, it observed that the section 377 amounts to an unreasonable restriction under the Article 19 of the Indian Constitution. And here the Supreme Court observed that the restrictions which are imposed in the name of public decency and morality are illogical and irrational in nature. That is why they should be done away with. Further, the court observed that the section 377 of the Indian Penal Code in its present form violates the Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution, that is, right to freedom. And finally, the court distinguished between consensual and non-consensual sexual activity between the individuals. And it observed that as the section 377 penalizes consensual sexual activity, it is violative of the right to privacy of an individual. And that is why it cannot be regarded as constitutional in nature. So finally, you should note that in the case of decriminalization of homosexuality under the section 377, the legislature and executive were reluctant due to majoritarian pressures. And in this line, the Supreme Court through its judicial review powers have shown the transformative nature of our Indian Constitution. And it has also helped in filling a legislative void. Now, after going through these points, you should try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. And with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, these are the 3 news snippets in today's newspaper which are important for us from preliminary examination point of view. The first one is related to a festival that is celebrated at Sabrimala. So this will form a part of the history and culture in the preliminary examination syllabus. The second is the Ujjwala Sanitary Napkin initiative. So this will form a part of the government schemes which are generally asked in the preliminary examination. And finally, on the page number 11, there is a news related to the renaming of 3 islands in Andaman and Nicobar. So these are important for us from Indian geography point of view. So let us look at them one by one. So the key aspects to be understood about the Makaravilakku festival that is held in Sabrimala are that it is a 21-day long festival which is celebrated at Sabrimala temple in Kerala. And we know that Sabrimala temple has been in news throughout this year. So that is why this festival becomes important for us from preliminary examination point of view. Further, it begins on the day of Makar Sankranti, that is 14th of January. And it is the concluding phase of the Sabrimala pilgrimage. And another important aspect of this festival is the Thiruvabranam, which is a procession where jewels and sacred ornaments are carried to be adorned on the Lord Ayappa. So the 3 aspects which are important for us from preliminary examination point of view are that the Makaravilakku festival is celebrated at Sabrimala temple in Kerala. Further, it starts on the day of Makar Sankranti. Further, it includes a procession which is called as the Thiruvabranam. So after going through this, you should try and answer this question from your preliminary examination point of view. And the answer for this question will be displayed after 5 seconds. So as we have learned, the correct answer here is C, that is both the statements 1 and 2 are correct. So what is important for us is the location or the place where this festival takes place. And secondly, what is the important highlight of this festival? So these 2 aspects should be kept in mind. Now let us look at the Ujjwala sanitary pad scheme. Now this initiative of Government of India is important for us from preliminary examination point of view under the topic important government scheme for social sector. Now this is important because as you know that in the year 2016 there was a question related to the Garima Abhiyan and that was related to the manual scavengers. That is why such government schemes which are related to the social sector initiatives for the improvement of vulnerable sections are important for us. Now what is important here is the name of this scheme. That is, the name of the scheme is Ujjwala Sanitary Napkins Initiative. Further, the next important point is that it has been started by 3 oil marketing companies. And these include the IOCL, the BPCL and the HPCL. So these are the 3 important oil marketing companies and they have started this initiative. So this fact should be kept in mind from your preliminary examination point of view. Further, you should note that it is a part of the Corporate Social Responsibility Initiative of Odisha Mining Corporation. And it aims at educating women on female hygiene and health. And it also aims at improving the accessibility to low-cost, eco-friendly sanitary pads. And further, you should note that these Ujjwala pads which are provided in this initiative will be made of virgin wood pulp sheet, non-woven white sheet and a gel sheet. And all these materials are biodegradable in nature. That is why these sanitary pads are environment friendly also. And they have minimum carbon footprint. Now after going through these points, you should try and answer this question from your preliminary examination point of view. And the answer for this question will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the correct answer here is C, that is 1 and 3 are correct because it is an initiative of IOCL, BPCL and HPCL and is not an initiative of the NTPC. Now let us look at the news which is related to the renaming of 3 islands of Andaman. Now the Honorable Prime Minister of India on Sunday had announced renaming of 3 islands of the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago as a tribute to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So now let us look at the name of these islands and what were the previous names of these islands. So first in this line is the Ross Island, and it has been named as Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose Dweep, and it is a part of Andaman Islands. So as you can see in the map here, the Ross Island is located here. The second island which has been renamed is the Neil Island, and it has been renamed as Shaheed Dweep. The location of Neil Island can be seen in the map here. And the third island is the Havelock Island, and it has been named as the Swaraj Dweep. And here also you can look at the location of Havelock Island in the map. So these are 3 important islands from our exam point of view. Now after this, you should go through this question from your preliminary examination point of view, and the answer for this will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the correct answer here is D, that is none of the above islands are in Nicobar group of islands, and all the 3 are part of Andaman. With this we have come to the end of today's discussion, and there is a piece of information for you that tomorrow there will be no DNS video. So the DNS of 1st January will be uploaded along with the DNS of 2nd January. And wish you all a very happy new year. Now let us look at the question for the day.